Bonjour le Breton. We should all know what those opening words are by this point. Today we're checking out everyone's favourite French fucks, similar to their real life counterparts in almost every way, except for their willingness to surrender faster than MajorKill comes when fucking some ebony thought. You guys asked and I have answered, although I'm kinda surprised that everyone wants to know about a bunch of fucking peasants and their obnoxious overbearing lords. But then again, everyone loves knights, especially when they are eco-friendly, so I can't say I'm too shocked about the whole situation. As before, all music in this video is available to listen to for free on my Patreon, or you can download it for $3. Let's get into it. Long ago, the lands of Bretonia looked very different to how they look now. I mean, now they look like a nuclear wasteland courtesy of the end times, but before that, lizardmen used to roam the lands of Bretonia, and after that it was settled by the High Elves, who established many colonies in the area. It was a happy place, where the birds sang, the bugs bugged, and not that many people died. Until some dumb elf fuck cut off some Dawi beard and it resulted in a cataclysmic war between the elves and the dwarves, ending in the almost complete migration of elves out of Bretonia and back to Ulthuan. The elves that chose to stay entered Athel Loren and became the Wood Elves. If you want to know more about the War of the Beard, then I have a video for it already. Anywho, Bretonia was now a bit vacant due to the mass death that occurred, hence was once again populated by a human migration from the west. Now, the cunts who migrated were not the ancestors of modern day Bretonians, no, these were pathetic farmers who were only able to survive for some time in Bretonia due to the complete lack of competition or significant predators. Hence, like the ill-fated dodo bird, or literally any other indigenous race ever, a follow-up human migration of a tribe called the Bretoni resulted in the almost complete genocide of these simple farm folk. Hence, the lands of Bretonia were now under the control of a stronger warlike race of men who continued to dominate the land all the way until the end times. I use the term dominate pretty loosely though, as they've had faced extinction quite a few times. Mostly from the greenskins, because apparently greenskins are at constant war with every single race in the entire world simultaneously. Anywho, the Bretonians were all about the survival of the fittest. The largest and strong among them basically just bullied everyone else into following them. They first became knights and then dukes of their own kingdoms. However, this meant that Bretonia was extremely divided, as we had a fuckload of big dudes claiming lordship of certain areas. When Murder Jesus came along and skullfucked half the planet to death in order to unite the Empire, he offered Bretonia to join them, but they were like, lick my balls, you German cunt. So that didn't really happen. Anyways, the Bretonian class system kept getting more and more fucked as dukes and knights emerged and just shat on the peasants. However, in saying that, the knights and dukes were obliged to defend their peasants no matter what, which sometimes resulted in one or two knights having to try and protect a town from a few dozen or more greenskins or beastmen. This is Warhammer, so naturally shit went down when a gigantic army of beastmen, greenskins, skaven, vampire counts, Norscan raiders and tomb kings simultaneously invaded Bretonia. Coincident timing. This was not so good, as Bretonia was still divided into multiple kingdoms and had no real large-scale army or a great deal of teamwork. But don't worry guys, Eco Muhammad, aka the Green Knight, aka Gilles le Breton, came out of nowhere and gathered an army to defeat the enemy, and he lost, pretty badly. So, he took his remaining men to go chill by a lake and just wait for Bretonia to die. This is when some random wet lake bitch came out of nowhere and blessed everyone. She then sucked on Eco Muhammad's cock, as well as two of his companions, and gave them superpowers. The power is basically just a really fat fucking charge bonus, which resulted in some Rohan tier shit, as Eco Muhammad's army just started one-shotting enemy armies from their initial charge. Basically, this continued on for a while. Eco Muhammad and supercharged friends would liberate a Bretonian duke, kill a fuck ton of bad guys, and then the Lady of the Lake would pop out and suck a few more cocks. The cycle kept going until the epic final battle of Coeur, which was actually quite epic, if not a bit random and out of place. So the Bretonians had crushed multiple different armies from different races, but in this final battle, greenskins, beastmen, skaven, trolls, and chaos monstermen all teamed up for this massive fuck-off battle that apparently lasted for weeks, which is a pretty long time, if you ask me. And eventually, good guys won and Eco Muhammad installed Sharia law, with the Lady of the Lake being Allah, and some random bitch called the Fey Enchantress popped up and became the avatar of Allah. Bretonia adopted a system where democracy was non-existent, and your societal class was determined by the Lady of the Lake's willingness to suck your cock. So, I guess the good guys won, but with the peasants being used as cannon fodder and forced to pay like 90% income tax, it was a pretty shit time overall, unless you're a knight. Anywho, the realm was at peace and becomes unified under Eco Muhammad. Eventually Gillies was riding around and then he got no-scoped by new Master 69 and died, because the demigod of King of Bretonia can almost single-handedly save the kingdom from millions of dark and terrible foes, but some random arrow is enough to end his life. Fair enough. This ended up creating a bit of a power vacuum, as when you have a leader who is so far above everyone else, it's hard to follow in his footsteps. Luckily enough, the Lady of the Lake was still in business, so after Eco Muhammad's son proved himself worthy, she gave him a big fat blowy and he became the new king of Bretonia. Now, I really fucked myself here by making comparisons of Bretonians to Islam, because the next major thing that happened was a massive invasion of Araby by Bretonia, who, if you know about anything about Araby, it's literally a bunch of Arabs, like, it's in the name. But fuck it, let's roll with it. So Araby declared a jihad on Astalia for whatever reason and began attacking. This pissed off the Empire in Bretonia, who had been itching for a chance to massacre some Muslims for a while now. Hence, a big fuck-off crusade was launched and white people once again asserted their dominance by massacring the larger Arabian armies. They would have potentially genocided the entire country if it weren't for their dislike of sand, as it is coarse, rough, and gets everywhere. The next little saga that Bretonia copped was a deadly Skaven plague called the Red Pox, which sucked a lot and was basically the bubonic plague. Lots of poor people died. Some died from the plague, but mostly from the dukes burning all the poor areas of the kingdom to stop the spread of the disease. Following this, the Skaven popped up and began a bunch of sneaky Jew attacks. However, a brave knight from Musselin, before it was a dirty undead shithole, rode forth and saved the lands from Skaven. However, he was secretly a vampire and had way too much fun killing the Skaven. Like, this cunt was teabagging the corpses, and it was very concerning for his fellow knights to witness. Anywho, the vampire knight hosted a feast at his castle to celebrate the defeat of the Skaven, but because he was deluded as fuck, he didn't realise people weren't happy to find his castle littered with dead bodies and stunk like shit. So when people were like, "What the fuck, man, clean up your shit," he got angry and jeweled the king. This ended with the king having his throat ripped open and the vampire knight drinking his blood. Needless to say, Mr. Vampire Knight got his fucking tits crusaded off and he ended up quite dead. Until, he came back to life a few hundred years later, because that's how vampires roll. Now, we've established that Bretonians love war, whether it be through a crusade or a jihad. They absolutely adore invading shit. Hence, they invented their own word for it, called an erranty. An erranty was basically a way for young knights to prove their worth and be granted titles and land. This could be through protecting a town, saving a lady, killing a monster, etc, etc. However, occasionally an erranty war would be called, which is basically an excuse for a king to quickly put together a solid army of ass kissers trying to prove themselves. This has its pros and cons. Pros was that this army got shit done and a lot of knights got promoted. The cons were that all the knights would usually go and usually die on these borderline suicidal crusades, leaving Bretonia severely undefended. Hence, after the death of an entire generation of knights and the ravaging of some undefended Bretonian lands, these dumb cunt Frenchies learnt to settle the fuck down with all that erranty shit. In recent times, Heinrich Clem has been fucking around in Bretonia, trying to destabilize it. But we all know he's a whiny little bitch who gets doggy fucked by Krell on a daily basis, so obviously nothing very exciting has happened there yet. I was actually pretty happy to see CA's inclusion of Heinrich in Bretonia to reflect the conflict that they share. Now that pretty much covers their history. Their current king, Leon Coeur, was a bit of a beast even in his early years before he had the power of a Grail Knight. During his erranty he killed monsters and demons left, right and centre before eventually returning home to request aid from his father to help him defeat a necromancer. Now, unsurprisingly, killing shit is dirty work, so when Leon returned home covered in blood, sweat, tears, mud and probably cum, with no tangible proof of his great deeds, as well as no blessing from the lady, his dad told him to suck his own nutsack, so Leon had to go try and fight this necromancer with only 13 knights. Needless to say, the boys gave it a good crack, but they all died horrific deaths, except Leon. He was being driven back towards the lake as he swung and cut at the zombies until he fell back into the lake and sunk. While he was drowning, he also randomly killed some underwater monster. Leon then drowned. He later woke in some cool underwater hangout spot where the lady of the lake sucked his cock like never before. Renewed by her glorious blowjob technique, he left the lake and absolutely tore the necromancer a new asshole before decapitating him with a shield. That's right, with a fucking shield. At the ripe old age of 90, Leon was voted in to be the king of Bretonia. However, he still appeared to be in his prime due to the lady of the lake's impressive deep throat techniques. Leon realised the armies of Bretonia needed to be better fighters, so he basically just threw a fuck ton of jousting tournaments, which despite sounding like a bad idea due to the obscene cost as well as high injury rates, turned out to be great and made the armies of Bretonia some of the greatest the world had ever seen, and the peasants already hated their lives so it didn't really matter. Leon continued to flex how big his dick was as he remained undefeated in every battle he fought. It was him who encouraged Karl Franz to become the emperor. In the now kind of canon, not really, Storms of Chaos story arc, Leon led his people in defense of the Empire, Rohan charging the shit out of the Chaos forces and rescuing Volkmar from the battlefield. Now that is what Bretonia did in the kind of canon, not really, Storms of Chaos. I say kind of canon because Games Workshop, they made it uncanon, but they pick and chose some stuff that they liked from it and made it canon, so there are parts that did happen. Now let's retract our boners and beat our wives because it's time to talk about the end times. Leon is chilling in Bretonia, being a dope-ass king and whatnot, when suddenly his boss's son, naughty boy Leon, pops up and initiates a big fuck-off civil war. Now there's a bit more backstory to it other than just random bastard goes evil. The bastard, Malobade, I think that's how you say his name, was once a noble knight who travelled the land doing cool shit to try and get one of the lady's famous blowjobs. Anywho, after much questing he eventually encountered the lady, and she offered the grail to him. He drank from it, but something fucked up, and he discovered who the lady really was and how she was basically just pranking the fuck out of Bretonians. More on that later. This made him extremely shitty as Malobade doesn't like getting pranked, so he rallied the Dukes of Muslin, built a big army of disgraced knights, bandits and mercenaries. Fuck, he even began recruiting vampires and necromancers to really pad out his army. For all intents and purposes, he was now the Black Knight. See how I didn't use an N-word reference there? Look how mature I have become in my old age. Anyways, Leon was like, "Oi, group up with me and let's murk this fool." And most of Bretonia did, but one of the dukes didn't, so he, along with the Fey Enchantress, attacked Malobade. Drycha and a bunch of branch wraiths also joined the battle to assist the good guys, so it looked like Malobade was going to get beaten in his first battle. But then Drycha, being a fucked cunt, kidnapped the Fey Enchantress and withdrew her army, hence without the murder trees and the lady's profit, the good guy Bretonians got beaten. After this big loss, half of Bretonia sided with Malobade, and Arkan the Black rocked up as well and brought a fuck ton of skeletons with him. So at this point Leon isn't looking too hot, until a massive army of wood elves as well as their heroes rock up to lend a hand. This resulted in a really epic battle between the two forces, with Leon and the wood elves on one side and Arkan and Malobade on the other. However, shit went down and Leon got beaten and seamlessly killed in a duel with Malobade, hence the wood elves withdrew and Bretonia was basically fucked. Malobade went around dueling knights and dukes for a while, but he killed all of them super easy. The few remaining dukes gathered in Coeur preparing to fight and die as Malobade's massive army approached. Malobade was like, "Alright cunts, anyone want to duel me?" And then Iko Muhammad, out of nowhere, rides out of the fucking city and just one-shots Malobade. Bang, rebellion done, Arkan runs, Gilles le Breton unifies Bretonia, GG easy. Except not GG easy, because Bretonia then suffers the greatest cosmetic clitoris event ever. In a short span of time, everything went to shit. Even the arrival of Iko Muhammad, who was now like Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan Kaioken times 20, could only do so much, as half of Bretonian peasants were wiped out by the plague, disaster and famine. The Fey Enchantress is sacrificed by Arkan in order to help revive Nagash, and a bunch of Bretonian cities have basically just randomly exploded due to warp fuckery. On the bright side, Leon is still alive somehow, so the Bretonian army splits into two. One commanded by Leon, which is boatloaded with the biggest erranty the world has ever seen, and he takes them up to help the Empire and Athel Lauren. The other half is commanded by Iko Muhammad, who remains in Bretonia to protect their quickly dwindling peasant population. Now, about the Lady of the Lake. It turns out that the lady is actually the elven god Lilith, who is basically just manipulating Bretonia to act as a buffer and cannon fodder to protect the elves. This is the truth Malobade discovered and why it went bad. Lilith planned to have the Grail Knights reincarnate in a new reality she had built for them, which would be basically full of superpowered humans and elves. This kind of fucked up because Be'lakor is a cunt, so her plan never comes to fruition. Which is a shame, but maybe it'll come back in Age of Sigmar, and we can get our Bretonian armies back. Anywho, Abarash and his Blood Knights team up with Gilles and his Grail Knights, and they go to Pound Town in Bretonia, killing so many fuckers that Chaos was a bit like, okay, settle down there cunts. Unfortunately, the books never go into detail about the level of ass-kicking Gilles and Abarash would have delivered together, both of them being in the top 5 warriors in Warhammer Fantasy, but we can only imagine. They were fighting non-stop for a fair while, and they only stopped because the world exploded, so I'd put their kill count well into the dozens of thousands. Leon's big fat erranty stuck around with the Empire, and he fought side by side with them. In a pretty fucking serious battle against the forces of Nurgle, Leon kills a massive greater demon, before himself then getting killed by another massive greater demon. He goes out like a true jihadist however, as his divine blood sprays everywhere and fucks up all the nearby demons it touches. In death he is raised into godhood by Lilith, however due to her plan going to shit and her dying, I'm not really sure how that ended for alt-mate Leon. It's likely that he's now a Stormcast Eternal or some shit. Bretonia takes a bit of a sideline for the rest of the end times and are destroyed along with everyone else. All the Grail Knights are either now Stormcast Eternals in Age of Sigmar, or they're patiently waiting for their chance to fly in on space horses and row-hand some cunts. Personally, I'd like to see them return in their own faction. Perhaps an extremely elite nomad faction of ethereal knights who serve order and only come at the most desperate times. Give them a Sephiron treatment in that the old minis for Bretonian knights now are valid again, but encourage players to make them seem more wholly ethereal or space-like. Easy to fit into the lore, and people can still use their armies, so it's a win-win. And there we have it guys, the entire plot and lore of Bretonia. To be honest, I don't really know why there was such a requested video considering Bretonia is a squatted faction, however they are in my top 3 most favourite Warhammer factions, so it does make a sense, I suppose. To my Patreon supporters, I do apologise for the lack of custom hentai. My favourite hentai artist is on holidays at the moment, but expect lots of absolute filth when he returns. In the meantime, if anyone wants to send in any questionable Warhammer art, then send it through and I'll feature it for sure. Join the Discord for more fuckery, and I'll see you cunts next time. Peace.